no, no! No! Somebody!
What the hell?
Hello, Enrique. You don't know me, but I know you. Don't play a game.
What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that?
You've been on a hunt for paranormal entities for the past several months, failing to achieve your very simplistic goal of experience, despite the fact that you've encountered many in the past few weeks.
Fuck is this?
Tonight, you improve your skills by getting rid of the one thing that allows you to do what you do best. Your hands. Because you're a shit temper. Right now you are tied in place. Your hands bound in place. On the device you will see a little button hidden beneath the cushion. Allowing you to subsequently free yourself from the restraints.
What I do?
Proceeding to make too much noise will, in return, cause the animatronic to move over to come and find you. If you are not successful in your task, the animatronic will rip your face apart into two. Succeeding, however, will allow you sanctuary and a story for the ages. How much blood will you be willing to shed every day? Make your choice.
Okay, I got this. Oh my god! Oh, no. Shit. Please. Oh. Got to go back to the house. It's time to play another game. Saw X just dropped, and now Jigsaw's lair is in Mexico. How you doing? Today we are ranking all the Saw films, 10 of them now. Jesus, the Saw has almost as much as fucking Halloween and Friday the 13th now, but shit. Today we're going to talk about each and every single one of those films. And we're going to see, in my opinion, which I prefer and which I don't prefer for the Halloween month. So without wasting any time, let's just do the bottom of the barrel. We all know what the bottom is. The worst Saw movie is Saw 3D for me. This is just an abysmal sequel. This sequel just honestly is almost like a slap in the face to both Saw fans and just horror fans in general. I mean, if you were a Saw fan up to this point in time, this film just felt like a terrible, piss poor conclusion to this entire franchise that didn't really feel climactic in any way, that didn't really feel like there was a lot being brought together for an epic final film. It just felt like that they tossed all the final little epicness at the very end of the movie with the last 5 minutes, to the point where I even say all the time that the only things I genuinely enjoy about this movie is the last 5 minutes of the movie, the car trap scene with the late great Chester Bennington from Linkin Park, and Charlie Clouser's music. I think that Charlie Clouser did his absolute best with the score. Out of all the Saw movies, you can tell that the score has just been peaked to where every track is memorable, every track sounds like it has a place in this film, or just sounds like it's enjoyable to listen to on its own. But of course, everything else about this film is just completely terrible in every sense of the word. I mean, if you didn't know any better, you probably didn't know that this film was originally supposed to be a 2-part film. Unfortunately, Saw 6 didn't do very good at the box office, so Saw 7 had to suffer for it. And they crammed 2 movies into one, where they had the idea of Bobby Dagan being this fake Jigsaw survivor having to be put through this game, and you also have the follow-up of Hoffman's story, and trying to blend those stories together did not work in the slightest, and it definitely felt both rushed and just poorly made. Not even to mention the shitty fucking coloring and saturation and the pink blood, and the reason they did that was for the 3D effects. I mean, the point of making Saw in 3D was genuinely pointless effort. Like, it didn't even seem like they cared when they made this film. Everything just shot out at the wall. It's just terrible. Piece of shit of a movie. The worst Saw film out of all of them, easily. Taking 9th place is going to be Saw 5. To me, this is probably the most boring Saw film out of all of them, to where Saw 7 is bad, but it's almost a cheesy bad, to where you can laugh at some things for how bad it is. Saw 5 is just straight up boring, to where you're following the story of Strom trying to figure out the investigation, trying to figure out and put the pieces together that Hoffman is an apprentice. The unfortunate thing about this is that you as the audience already know that Hoffman's the killer. You as the audience already know that Strom has to figure it out. And so when you watch the whole film and they kind of spend runtime with Strom just looking around for clues that we already know what he's gonna find at sites we've already been at, and they go and do flashbacks again and back and forth, it's just a waste of the time, to where the only flashback you really needed for this Saw movie was the flashback with Hoffman being kidnapped by Jigsaw and being interrogated. Everything else just felt like a pointless little Neanderthal for nostalgia tossed in there. It's like, hey, you remember this trap? Well, now you get to see the behind the scenes of how this trap was made. Hey, you remember this trap? Now you get to see the behind the scenes of that trap. And whilst it's cool, it dragged the runtime for an already boring story. I mean, the Fatal Five are not that interesting in the slightest. And when you have so much lackluster things going on, of course you're gonna have a lackluster conclusion, to where the twist at the end of the movie was not a twist at all. We as the audience already knew that was going to happen. We as the audience already expected something to happen, and exactly how we thought it was gonna happen, it happened. Even the traps in this movie didn't feel as grand. There's a lot of traps with the Fatal Five that just kind of came and went, and you're not gonna remember it tomorrow. Like, all the good traps were with Strom, because the movie does not do a good job selling those traps. Even the soundtrack in this movie, the score, not the soundtrack, the score, Charlie Clouser's score feels the most boring and feels the most generic here, to where I don't even notice the score. There's only like a few scores here and there that I notice from this soundtrack. So overall, Saw 5 is just a very forgettable film, and it's obvious that it's more like a filler episode to continue the little soap opera drama that they have going on. But for me, it's gonna land second to last place. Coming in 8th place is gonna be Jigsaw. Now, Jigsaw was a movie that came out in 2017, 7 years after the Saw franchise had finished and had died out, and it was believed that Jigsaw was going to continue the story of Saw in a new light and bring some new elements to the Saw movie, and perhaps even bring a new interesting story to it. And what it turned out to be was just another boring, generic Saw movie, where you have another apprentice of John Kramer who just so happens to have survived a game by mistake because John for some reason let him loose, and then by the end of the movie it's revealed that it was him. And overall, the characters just do not feel compelling at all, to where you don't ever feel the stakes of the movie. In a way, this is like the opposite of what Saw 5 was like, to where Saw 5 and the Fatal 5 were very boring and you were more interested in Strahm and Hoffman's cat and mouse game. Here it's the opposite, where the detective story and the detectives trying to put this case together is the boring story. And then you have the Fatal 5 in this movie that is a lot more interesting and seems to have a lot more charisma to their step. But even that doesn't really offer a lot in terms of entertainment, because the movie just kind of ends on a whimper and doesn't really offer much in terms of why they brought Saw back to begin with. If anything, it made the lore even more confusing of the Saw franchise, and we had already seen enough retcons as is, but at least the retcons from Saw 1 to 7 all made sense. But the retcon in this one didn't make sense at all. And so for me, you know, despite the fact that I do enjoy Charlie Clouser's score, despite the fact that I do love the updated look, the 4K quality, despite the fact that I do like the Billy the Puppet, I think this is Billy Puppet's the best design, despite the fact that I really enjoyed the simplicity of the traps in this one, it's just another forgettable Saw movie that you could just toss on one day and just toss away the next day if you want. Coming in 7th place is gonna be Saw 4. Now, Saw 4 is kind of the descent of the Saw movies. When you get to this Saw film, it's clear that the quality definitely dips in terms of the writing and in terms of the storytelling and in terms of the reason of you caring to begin with, which is John Kramer. I mean, this is the first movie where you not only have James Wan and Lee Winnell not in the movie, not making the movie, not writing the movie, but you also don't even have John Kramer as a threat because he's dead. And because he's dead, they have to find a new way to tell the story, and how they tell the story is sort of like an interquel movie, to where it's a prequel whilst also being a sequel movie by having events take place at the same time as Saw 3's events. However, the story this time around doesn't offer a lot in terms of intrigue. It doesn't really give you much to really care about, to really enjoy in what you're watching, to really invest, because the character of Officer Rigg was never that interesting of an officer. He was always kind of the background officer that was there, but now we're supposed to take Officer Rigg seriously. Now we're supposed to take Officer Rigg as the main guy, and he just didn't fit the role all too well. And the traps and all the different games in this one, they never really intrigued me as much as other games throughout the franchise, to where even though most of the people in these traps are all shitty human beings, which is the point of Saw, and you can actually see them do these shitty things, you never really get invested. You never really feel like you're enjoying seeing these people try and escape the traps, or you're at least wondering if they are going to make it out. You never feel like you genuinely care. And I felt that was a bit of a problem, because the Saw 4 movie does have some comedic moments, and what I do like about this movie is that the FBI agents in the forms of Agent Strahm and Agent Perez, they genuinely felt like FBI agents. They genuinely felt like they knew what they were doing and they were on the scene, to where Agent Strahm would be figuring shit out left and right like this, the snap of the finger. He'd be putting shit together, and I really loved that about his character, to where he would even interrogate Jill Tuck and he'd have this snarky remark to him, and you even have these funny little gags to where you have these shots sometimes, these one frame shots of him like fucking around with his gun, like pointing the gun at her, pointing the gun at himself, and it makes for some funny ass visuals. But unfortunately, they didn't really use Strahm that much in this movie, and by the time that they did end up using Strahm in Saw 5, they didn't utilize him to his full potential. So I wish that we kind of got more of Strahm, this version of Strahm, and see how he would have done throughout the movie. But all in all, Saw 4 is kind of a forgettable movie altogether, and I really wish that they followed up on the Saw 3 story years down the road, or maybe had something else to tell, a different reason to bring Saw back, and a different way to tell the story following Kramer's death. Coming in 6th place is gonna be Spiral from the Book of Saw. Now, this movie got a lot more hate from Saw fans than I think it deserved, because this movie at least did something fresh and at least focused on a new variation of Saw and tried to take it in a new direction by having a copycat rather than an apprentice, and by making the game solely focused on the detective story and the cops. And I love the way that they utilized the game and the detective story throughout the movie and made it the main focal point. And it also came out during a time period, coincidentally, where that was very relevant. Where if you were to watch the movie when it came out, you would almost feel like a resemblance, like the message was clear. But unfortunately, the movie in and of itself definitely has a little bit of lackluster things going on, to where it has a similar problem as most of the Saw movies, and that is the characters have so much potential to them, but are never truly utilized in the best way, to where Chris Rock's character in this movie, I believe his name is Zeke, is never capable of being utilized in the best way. His character arc and his backstory regarding his wife and regarding his son never gets explored. His backstory regarding his father never gets fully flourished to be able to enjoy more. We only get like one scene where Marcus and Zeke are enjoying each other's time before shit hits the fan. And it's stuff like that that I kind of wish we got more, because to me, when it comes to movies and when it comes to writing in general, characters is always the starting point of any good story. You know, you have characters and story are always the main focal points of making good writing and making the best of what you can make. And there is a lot more that the characters could have offered. And speaking of characters, the character of William Shank was a very cliche, generic, basic, nice guy revealed to be killer kind of deal. And it just didn't really suit the vibe, you know, because you never really bought into the fact that he was there. In fact, you know, his character felt so bleak, like you didn't even notice he was in the movie until he's like the copycat now, and now he's all smart and all trickster, now he got all the games and shit. And it's just like, I didn't care all that much about his character. I didn't care all that much about what the movie offered. And a big problem that I had with the movie was the copycat detective tapes, where they use this computer voice that sounds very shitty, and it doesn't sound intimidating in the slightest, which bothered me, because the point of Saw is to be intimidating, you know, the intimidation factor of waking up after being kidnapped in this device that looks like it could rip you apart, and then having this dark, deep voice tell you, whether it be in the shape of a puppet talking or whether it be a cassette tape, telling you that, you know, you gotta figure out how to survive. And when you have this shitty ass computer voice talking in a monotone tone voice that doesn't even sound like it sounds good at all, it sounded like shit, and I fucking hated it throughout this whole movie. And something else I kind of wish we had more of was the new pig doll, which they utilized the pig doll a few times, but they never really made the pig doll at its own establishment, to where I think that if William Shank was a better character and the mascot was utilized a bit better, it could have been a much more bigger standout in the whole franchise. Unfortunately, Spiral just kind of came and went, if you will. It kind of spiraled out of control. And in fact, that was also a very weird decision to have a rap EP on this soundtrack, because it didn't fit the vibe of Saw, for one, and it also contradicted the kind of soundtracks we've been having, which is all heavy rock and metal, to where when you're watching all the Saw movies and all these soundtracks have heavy rock and metal music, and then you get to this one and it has rap, it's very contradictory. And sometimes it could be cool to shake things up, but the rap songs in this movie, despite having great remixed melodies and great remixed beats of some of the Saw tracks, the actual vocals and the singing too is just basic rap shit, and they kind of just toss in just popular rappers just to get EP attention, and it just didn't suit the film at all. Coming in 5th place is going to be the new guy, Saw X. Now, I felt like this movie was the perfect middle of the road movie, where it was better than all the other mediocre movies that I already discussed, but I don't think it was as good as some of the more classic and entertaining Saw movies that are above this movie on this list. Now, before I get into it, I just want to say that I am going to be discussing spoilers, so if you are somebody who has not seen the Saw movie, then I recommend you skip ahead to 4th place, but if you're watching this on a premiere, I recommend that you mute me all the way up until you see this image change to the next Saw movie. So I'm gonna give you 5 seconds to do that. Alright, let's discuss spoilers. Now, I'm going to say off the bat, I really enjoyed the concept and the central theme of this movie, focusing on John Kramer finally having his own solo movie and finally having him with his perspective of things, of his perspective on the game, of his perspective on why he does what he does, and how he wants to overcome cancer. He wants to live eternal life, or maybe not eternal life, that's a little bit of a me thing, but he definitely wants to live longer. And so the movie focuses on that and how these scammers really do him dirty. And then, of course, he does his Jigsaw shit and puts them in their fucking place. And, of course, you have Amanda who comes back as well. And that's going to be a discussion a little bit later on. But overall, I think that the concept focusing on this was a great idea. It definitely made this movie a lot more fresh and a little bit more unique. And I always wondered why they hadn't done this idea all the way back in like Saw 3. This could have been like a Saw 3, and they could have continued with like a Saw 4 with the actual Saw 3 that we got, or something along those lines. Like, they could have really made this a series when they still had Kramer alive, but obviously they missed out on an opportunity, and James Wan and Lee Winnell were really focusing on a trilogy. I also really enjoyed the traps in this. I thought the traps were really well made and well done to perfectly blend with that brutality of the traps, whilst also having that Kramer style of somebody actually has a possibility of surviving. And there are some people who survive. Diego survives. Gabriella did survive. Unfortunately, that bitch Cecilia also survived, which I'm also going to talk about her pretty soon. But at least the traps felt like classic Saw. And I really enjoyed the first trap, the eyeball trap, because it was not an actual trap. It was more so John Kramer envisioning what he would do to that guy if he proceeded with actually doing it. And I really liked the fact that he told the guys yo, you made the right choice, and kind of left him off the hook, knowing that if he didn't make the right choice, well, he was gonna fuck him up with that fucking trap, because that trap is brutal with the fucking eyeballs. Fucking hell, man. I really love it, though. I enjoy it. I also really enjoyed the amount of fuck you energy that this movie gives. That's the best way that I could describe it, because the way that this movie does its fuck you energy is already on my level of how I see the world. So when I see it, it's not as surprising, but if somebody else were to see this, it would be like, holy fucking shit, they didn't give two fucks. And I really enjoyed that about this movie, especially with one chick in particular. There's this Valentina chick, which for 3 times in a row, they fucking did her dirty. First time, she almost gets raped in the back of a car, and then Amanda comes and saves her, only for her to then kidnap Valentina and then put her in a fucking deadly ass trap. You saved her life, but now you're gonna fucking almost die from torture and shit. It's like, well, is that better or is that worse? It makes you think sometimes. And then after she proceeds to actually die, which I will complain that her trap, sticking the fucking plug into her leg while she already cut off her leg and then trying to draw blood, she would have fucking passed out. There's no fucking way, especially considering how much blood it had to take from her leg, and considering the fact it's an open wound that she just cut, she was gonna pass out. There's no way. But after she dies, the main villain, the Cecilia chick, proceeds to then cut her stomach open and use her intestines as a rope to get a phone that's on a table and just reel the table over, which is holy fucking shit. That was really cool. I really enjoyed that. And then they proceed to also utilize her decapitated head later as a stand-in, and they covered it with a mask. Oh, you got me. Nope, it was actually the decapitated head. They just did not give a fuck about that character. They also have the scene later on in the movie where they actually put a fucking kid in a saw trap. Now, granted, it was after the villain got an advantage over John Kramer, and she put the kid into the fucking trap for some reason, which I don't really know why she did that, but she did. And it was supposed to be Amanda and John Kramer that were in this trap, and it's called the Blood Board, and they were supposed to essentially go see seesawing back and forth, taking blood in the face, and it was supposed to be symbolic and metaphorical about, oh, Amanda becoming the new Jigsaw, and if John Kramer dies, she takes on the mantle. Well, that's not really what fucking happened. Carlos had to take that spot instead, and that kid was eating blood, dog. They did not give a they were pouring blood. If you thought Evil Dead Rises earlier in this year were fucking going ham with the blood and how they fucking poured that blood on that little girl, they fucking pour a gallon of blood on Carlos and did not give a fuck about it, and I really enjoyed that. I also enjoyed the fact that the kid was actually like willing to die for John Kramer, and you know, if you would have asked me in the moment, I wouldn't be able to tell you how that would have went, because we all know John Kramer's surviving. So I was thinking, are they actually gonna do it? Are they gonna fucking kill this kid? Are they gonna have that blood just fucking kill him? Like, holy shit, they were really going there. But I was like, also, they're not gonna kill off the kid. And they didn't. But it was still like very tense to where a casual watcher would really be thinking, this kid's about to die, and I'm all for it. Even though they didn't have to pull in the kid, it felt random as fuck. It definitely amped up the stakes, because now you're thinking, well, fuck, what is Kramer gonna do? Carlos, like Kramer says, was a fucking warrior. So all props to that kid, man. I would not have been able to do that. Sorry, Kramer, you gotta die. Also, the score during that whole scene with the bloodboard, I thought was fantastic. I thought it was the best score from Charlie from that whole movie, because the soundtrack overall was very mediocre at best, but I enjoyed that bloodboard score. It was definitely his best work in a long time. I thought it was fantastic, and I'm glad that it was released as its own separate single, and that they cut out the introduction, which was very boring. This song is definitely like a classic emotional piece, and it really helped with that scene and building that scene up to be a lot more impactful. Now, in terms of negatives, I do have my fair share of negatives, starting off with the Cecilia character as the main villain. I thought she was very devoid of personality, and she felt very generic at times. At first, when they had her playing off this con and being straightforward and very serious about her job, I thought she was doing a pretty good job, especially during the game where she's trying to hype up everybody's like, come on, you could do it, you could survive, come on. And then when they die, she just didn't give two fucks. But after she gets like full main villain mode, when they turn the tides on John Kramer and Amanda, she felt fucking lifeless and flat. Like, her character felt like, okay, we need to make her just a generic bitch, so let's have her just put a child in a trap, and it just didn't work for me. She has no memorability in terms of like a character that's worthy foe to Kramer. She was smart, but she wasn't that interesting of a character. She's definitely a forgettable character, and I don't think it was that well executed on her part to be the main villain. I wish for a little bit more. I thought that Xavier from Saw 2 played off a better villain and main antagonist than her in this movie. And speaking of our other main antagonist, John Kramer, I did not like the fact that this movie just shows John Kramer off like they did, because this movie's supposed to set between Saw 1 and 2, and around this time frame, John Kramer was still anonymous. They didn't really know who he was. They didn't know that he was Jigsaw, so him kind of showcasing himself front and center, I get it, because, you know, he has a personal connection with all these people, like, oh, you did me wrong specifically. But at the same time, though, it's like he's revealing himself to everybody, and if one of these characters survive, well, the whole Jigsaw thing, well, he's gonna get found out, and it's before Saw 2, so him being found out before Saw 2 would have really fucked things over. And the other characters as well, I have no idea why they showcased them front and center either. Like, Amanda being seen in a game might expose her as like the new Jigsaw, and that's bad for the cops. They could track her down even more easily. And the same thing with Mark Hoffman. He's all fucking dressed up, suit and tie, like, oh yeah, I'm a detective for another guy later on in the movie at the post credits. And it's like, well, why are you just showing yourself off? You're supposed to stay anonymous, otherwise they're gonna fucking figure you out. I just did not like the fact that they were just all open about it and public about their identities, despite the fact this is around the time where they're supposed to be more hidden with their games. I also am not a big fan of prequels, so this being like an interquel and you already know the direction of where it's going obviously throws me off a bit, but considering the fact that this movie focused more so on John Kramer's solo story, it helped a bit more because you know what a Saw movie is gonna be, you know what you're gonna get, but at the same time though, it's like you know where the end goal is, and there's no other time where you don't know what the end goal is. And Amanda's character overall, I thought her performance was not that noteworthy or that great. I thought it was just okay, and I kind of wish there was a little bit more emotional reaction out of her. Like, granted, I do enjoy the fact that she's not as crazy as she is in Saw 3, and you could see how and why she would slowly descend into madness, seeing the events of this Saw movie and then having to go through Saw 2 and such. But at the same time though, I just felt like there could have been a lot more of a performance out of Shawnee Smith's character in this one. Also, personally, I don't think you can cut a piece of your brain off without causing a seizure or, you know, flat out just passing out from the second that you drill your brain in. So that trap, even though I really liked how the concept was utilized, I thought was also not that realistic. But that's just me nitpicking. And ultimatum-wise, at the end, I don't feel like a lot was achieved. I felt like we didn't really go anywhere or do much. And granted, I know this was a more of a isolated, campy story, which I really enjoy. I just wish that there was more to it in regards to how it concluded, being more straightforward with its conclusion rather than being a little bit more ambiguous about it. Coming in fourth place is gonna be Saw 6. Despite being in the worst sequel section and not really having much to offer and feeling like another basic Saw movie, definitely out of all the Saw movies feels one of the most entertaining, to where when you're watching the movie, you actually get a sense of joy watching and seeing if this character of William Easton can make it through all these different traps. And what I loved about these traps is that each of these traps had their own unique style to them. So where you have William Easton trying to survive the spring lock suit. No, that's not. No, I meant, sorry. He was trying to survive the breathing oxygen tank. And then later on, he goes into the sister location hallway and finds the dead bodies. No, wait, my fault. He goes into the hallway and he finds Billy the puppet, and he has to choose who lives or dies by hanging one and leaving the other to live. And then you go into the steam boiler room with Ennard. No, that's not right either. No, he goes into the steam boiling room where he has to figure out this maze and get his personal assistant to go across there and survive. And then you have the last trap, which is probably one of the more popular traps, which is the scooping room. Fuck! The carousel, where the fucking shotguns are shooting each of the people, and he has to pick who gets shot in the abdomen and who doesn't. And then, of course, he had this gnarly-ass death in the final trap, where, don't tell me. There's no people in Five Nights at Freddy's that gets acid through their stomach. Is there? Molten acid? No. Oh, come on! Scott, you sure you haven't seen the Saw movies? Because literally almost everything feels like it's from Saw. Just saying. But yeah, Saw 6 had a likable protagonist for once, to where when you're watching this protagonist, even though he done some bad things, you want to root for him because he has the emotion, he has the charisma in his acting, and you genuinely feel for him. You know, it's kind of funny that his name is William Easton and William Afton. The movie does have its flaws, being that it is a generic sequel to the Saw films that does the same thing of having one person go through room to room with different traps, and it also has the cop story that kind of just is sped through with Hoffman, and he just kills everybody in the end, so it's not that big of a deal. But I did appreciate the different lines that John Kramer's character gives in this. I really enjoyed those in this movie. And then of course you have the epic ending with Hoffman, and he's not wearing a Freddy Fazbear spring lock mask, but he might as well fucking look at this shit. You're telling me that Scott didn't get inspiration from that? Purple gay! Anywho, Saw 6, despite having some mediocre retcons that I prefer to not to happen, is a fun and entertaining movie. And if you were to throw on a Saw movie just to be entertained and have fun, this is your movie. Guaranteed. Coming in third place is gonna be Saw 3. 3. Yeah, it's kind of obvious that I was gonna put the original trilogy above the rest of the sequels because, you know, the original trilogy is written well, you know, it actually has a great story to it. It doesn't rely on generic traps, generic games, and repeat of everything, and it doesn't rely on stupid apprentices. Saw 3, however, has always been a mixed bag for most people, and it's really because of the character of Jeff and his decision making. What I don't think people really understand is that Jeff is a really fucked up guy, and obviously he's really going through the motions, and him making slow decisions is a part of his character. That's what I always presumed. I never got angry at him for being so slow, because it's not the matter that he has to save the person, it's the more the matter is if he wants to save the person. So I never had a problem with that. What I did have kind of a problem with is Amanda, specifically that certain scenes with Amanda felt like they dragged on, and they never really got to the point where we have like multiple different flashbacks to where each flashback does feel important in its own way. It's just that those flashbacks are just put together side by side in such a quick motion, and you just constantly see her cutting herself, and it's just like, can we just get back to the main focus of the movie, which is the traps or John Kramer and his survival, because those were the most intriguing parts of the movie. It could have been edited in a different way that could have made the runtime feel a lot more smoother and spread out those scenes to make it a lot more emotional for Amanda's character arc. But what I did enjoy was that Amanda was this crazy chick in this movie. She was a little bit hell-bent going on, and it kind of showed how John Kramer's influence, even though it has helped her in fighting her drug abuse, it hasn't truly helped her in fixing her being. And that becomes a conflict later on in the movie, to where the final resolution with everything going on, and John Kramer revealed to have gave Amanda one more game, one more test, just to see if she could pass, and she failed. I loved that storytelling. I loved the story going on there. And I love that for once John Kramer doesn't feel like he is the true villain, and he genuinely feels like he has compassion for somebody other than himself, which, even though I do love the selfishness of John Kramer, you know, that's what makes him so charismatic and snarky. The ideas of him having to really want to have saved somebody and helped somebody, and him realizing in that moment that he hasn't really saved anybody. And there's this quick little moment to where when he's seeing Amanda dying and he's sad about her death, and he turns to Jeff and he goes, "You haven't learned anything, have you?" It's like a perfect little moment for his realization. It was a perfect end to a perfect story, and I loved the little cliffhanger that made it even better. But all in all, Saw 3's pacing could have been a lot better. There's a lot more scenes that could have been executed slightly better and made to flow a lot more smoothly. Coming in at second place is gonna be the original Saw. Most people have the original Saw at the top of their list. Me, nah. As much as I love the original Saw, I'm not one to deny that the original Saw is a little cheesy. There is certain things that have not aged all too well, albeit some people take it a little too extreme and say, "Oh, it's just flat out trash." Boy, if I go to see your old school movies and I could figure out all your outdated shit, you wouldn't be complaining then. You'd be mad at me for pointing that shit out. Please. But yeah, the original Saw movie, even though there's certain things that were outdated, there's certain things that were a little cheesy, it still was a great new movie that introduced a new element, a new concept in horror that really made things feel even more eerie and creepy. Just waking up in a room and there's this elaborate puzzle all over. How they execute that, it was just so great, and it was so nice and well done to where you didn't really know what is going on. And the story that they tell and have the detectives and trying to give you that exposition of they called him the Jigsaw Killer. It really sucked you in and really invested you, and you would see all these different bodies and all that, and it really made you intrigued to see what would happen next. And so many things about this original film just worked. I mean, for one, Adam's character, even though Lee Winnell had to work his ass off to try and fucking get an American accent and keep it throughout the movie, and he actually somehow did better than Cary Elwes' British accent. What I liked about his adventure throughout this movie is that his character felt the most genuine, to where all his reactions to things in like the opening 10 minutes all felt like it would be something that you or I would say if we were in that predicament, just fucking so confused and unintentionally making comedic jokes without trying to be funny. You know, we're not trying to be funny, we're just saying shit of like, what the fuck is going on? My name is very fucking confused. What's your name? And I really like that element about his character. And his character pretty much carried Carrie. He pretty much carried Carrie throughout the whole movie, to where his charisma throughout the movie just made you so compelled to find out what happens next. And every time he opened his mouth, he would always say something snarky or something comedic that would always make you either chuckle or just bust out laughing. I mean, even the point where he has to fake die. Some people call that a shitty scene, but that was the point. And then, of course, you can't talk about this movie without talking about the traps and the twists. The traps, first of all, were so unique at the time. Nobody had seen something like a reverse bear trap with this mechanism around the skull that would rip your jaws open, and then you have Billy the Puppet smiling there, and he rolls up on his tricycle, say congratulations. It's like, what the fuck is that? And then you have the pig mask and what it represents, and that little eerie mask in the darkness crawling and shit. I just loved all these little small unique moments to where it just builds tension without having to force a jump scare, to where when there is a jump scare, it gives it to you. You know, it doesn't tease you, it doesn't false play you, it doesn't scroll down the music, it goes for it. It's like it builds up that tension and then it hits you in the face. If you're not ready, you're not ready. Shit hits. And I just really enjoyed that about this movie. And then of course I enjoy the twist. The twist and the reveal of this movie is still one of the best, if not the best cinematic twist of all time. In John Kramer being the fucking guy in the room the whole time who is dead. Nobody has ever guessed that. I call bullshit if you say you knew that it was the guy on the floor. No, the fuck you didn't. Shut the fuck up. Because ain't no way you would have figured that out, and nothing telegraphs him to have been the guy on the floor the whole time. And that's what I love about it, is that it was not so easily telegraphed. You had to like put it together piece by piece and figure it out and be like, oh, that makes sense. What I also love is that when they show you like flashbacks and they reveal stuff to you, they kind of like give you clues all there together. Like in that final act with Hello Zet playing Charlie Clouser's amazing score, like it was fucking great. You have that moment where they're showing you all these clips and say, well, that's the Jigsaw killer. It sounds like Jigsaw, and it show you different things of like what you should have been able to figure out on your own. I love that, and this movie for sure is going to be a classic, albeit I don't think it is perfect, and I do think that there is a better Saw movie than it. But coming in first place is gonna be Saw 2. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. If you would have seen my top 20 favorite movies of all time earlier this year, you would know that Saw 2 made the list, because Saw 2 is just a fucking awesome horror movie. I fucking love Saw 2. Everything about Saw 2 just amplifies what made the original Saw so great, and just added on to it with more stuff, with better execution, with much more to engulf that makes it even grander than the original Saw in so many ways. You have the opening trap, which is one of the most iconic opening traps, with Darren Bousman's Billy the Puppet voice that's just so sinister and eerie, and when he plays the tape in the nerve gas house as well, you just hear that voice. You have John Kramer throughout the entire movie this time around, and you just get to see how charismatic Tobin Bell is as an actor, and you get to see how snarky and narcissistic that this character of John Kramer is, and how he utilizes his philosophy and how he plays his little games and uses Detective Eric Matthews as a pawn. And Detective Eric Matthews is also a nosy work, because for once he actually feels like a genuine character in this film, to where you feel bad for him, you feel for his son, but at the same time you know the things that he's done in the past is all coming back to haunt him. And the nerve gas house is one of the best Saw things that ever came out of Saw, and I'm shocked that they never did this again, to where the traps throughout the house all kind of like spread out in different areas, random places, and you would have to choose to go into the trap yourself instead of the trap kind of activating on its own. And if you try to disobey the trap, then the trap would attack you. I just love everything about this Saw movie. The score, even though the score was kind of mediocre in this movie, there are some original tracks in here by Charlie that just made for some really great listens on my own when I played a soundtrack sometimes. And then of course you have the reveal of Amanda being John Kramer's apprentice, and what that leads to in Saw 3, and that build up. Even though some people could have predicted Amanda being the apprentice, what I loved about it was setting it up by playing off of the original film and utilizing the original film to further the story in a better way, rather than trying to retroact the original movie. What I also loved is that this movie has another greatest cinematic twist endings, with the fact that the house and what what you're seeing on the feed already happened in the past and you're in the present. When Eric Matthews goes to the house and he gets got by the pig mask, it's just great shit all around. I just fucking love Saw 2. For me, easily Saw 2 is the best Saw movie, and I wish there was a time period where we could have just got the original Saw trilogy and maybe a much better fourth film executed way down the line. But it is what it is. Saw 2, I don't think it's ever going to be topped, and I don't think any Saw sequel will ever top it unless they genuinely try their asses off. But James Wan and Lee Winnell had a great vision, and combining that with Darren Lynn Bousman's original story, forming it into this amazing Saw movie, it was just perfect all around. All the ingredients mixed in together just to make one badass horror movie. So for me, easily the best Saw movie is going to be Saw 2. But what about y'all? What's y'all's favorite Saw movie? Most people's 1 or 2, obviously. But I don't know, sometimes I've heard some very weird ones. One of my friends, he's the Saw soundtracks guy, he has Saw 5 as his favorite, which is strange to me. But regardless of the fact, you know, we all got our own subjective opinions to what Saw films you like, and I quite honestly don't give a shit. But obviously you give a shit because you wanted to watch me. So that makes me happy. Anyway, arrivederci, you bitch ass motherfucker.